Full self-driving is getting closer and closer, and it seems that at least for the general case, Tesla has a substantial lead. What happens if and when we actually reach level 4 and 5 autonomous driving? Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. This channel is dedicated to finding out whether I really do know it all or not. If you enjoy the video, definitely make sure you press the like button and also make sure you subscribe. And if this is before October 10th, 2020, definitely check out this video up here because we're doing a 500 subscriber giveaway, so you might as well get involved. And honestly, even if you miss that, we're going to do another one at 1,000 subscribers, so go ahead and subscribe so you can get in on that one early. So this is a thought experiment about if and when full self-driving is solved by Tesla. I think it's going to be Tesla. It might be another company, but anyway, assuming it's Tesla, the question is what's going to happen in 5 years and 10 years. I want to point out very clearly that just like the SpaceX one I did with the Starship, which is up here, this is just a kind of a highlight reel. I would be really interested to find out in the comments what you think other things might be that might occur as well. I mean, this video is going to be long enough anyway without having to get completely into the weeds about it. So I just want to mention that so people don't go like, hey, you didn't cover this. Hey, you didn't cover this. If you think that there was something important that I missed, definitely put that in the comments because why not? Then we can talk about it. Also, it's important to note that there is absolutely no guarantee that full self-driving will be solved. But at this point, Tesla seems to be in the best situation to do so. I've got a couple of different videos about why, so I'm not going to really cover that right now. But basically, they have a data lead and they have a software and also kind of a hardware lead in terms of how they're doing this. But anyway, check out those other videos if you want. In fact, honestly, I think this is 90 or 91 videos at this point. So, you should just check out a bunch of them. You can go down a rabbit hole and you can look at a whole bunch of stuff that I've talked about. Anyway, if full self-driving 2.0 is as good as Elon Musk is saying it is, he says that he expects them to be basically feature complete by the end of 2020, which is pretty remarkable. That means that everything doesn't work perfectly, but everything is in place to work perfectly. So if that's the case, we should be at the point where we can do autonomous driving pretty darn soon. So once again, as with my other thought experiments, let's gaze into the crystal ball and see what happens when full self-driving becomes a reality.
Or keep yourself open for any input that may come to you.
First, I think it's super important to point out that full self-driving is not going to just magically jump to level 5. So there's actually 6 levels. There's a level 0, which is nothing. But level 1 is basic cruise control. Level 2 is like the radar-based cruise control that keeps you from running into a car in front of you, which I have in our Mazda CX-5, which is great. I love it. Level 3 is the capability to drive anywhere autonomously, but with human intervention. In other words, the hand on the steering wheel kind of thing. Once you get this all completely working, you're basically at level 4, which basically is the same thing except without human intervention. And then level 5 is the same thing as level 4, which basically means it can drive anywhere, but you don't even have like a steering wheel or a gas pedal, an accelerator or a brake or anything like that. So that's going to take a while because you'll have to redesign cars to get to that point. So first of all, we're at about level 2.5 right now is what people say. I mean, some people say that Tesla's kind of to the level 3 level, but there's a lot of places that it still can't handle on its own. So what happens if level 4 happens tomorrow, right? If someone goes like, got it, solve the problem, we are still years away from actually having that be a reality because of regulatory concerns, right? And those are going to be local. You're not going to just suddenly have the entire United States say, yes, this is all fine. The almost 100% likelihood for the United States and most other countries is that local communities will start to approve this. So places like New York City or Paris or Jakarta or whatever, that these local municipalities will be the first ones to grant approval because it will be solving a need. They will have the ability to have people get autonomously driven in a very complicated traffic situation in a place where people like to have taxis and where they are used to getting rides and so forth. So I think that'll happen first. And also maybe even before that will be highway approval. That could happen on the federal level. It might also happen on the state level. So there might be a weird thing where, like, I live in Georgia, and maybe in Georgia we'll be allowed to autonomously drive ourselves, but then when you cross to Alabama or Florida, the regulations change, and so then you have to take back over again. So there could be this weird period of time where you've got full autonomy, but because of the different municipalities and states and different agencies, that you'll be allowed to use it in some circumstances, but not in others. In fact, that's almost a certainty that that will happen. But for sure, I think that highways are going to be something that will be pressed for really rapidly. It's a very simplified situation, right? Cars are in a very simplified setup. There's a certain number of rules. There's entrances and exits. People are going more or less the same speed. There's not stop signs or stoplights or anything like that. So those are situations where I think full self-driving, in fact, actually autopilot with Tesla is already pretty darn good at that. And there's other companies. I drove a Toyota Camry recently, rented one, and it actually had a pretty reasonable full self-driving thing, but it was also scary because it would be driving along and all of a sudden it would just be like, poof, it's not working anymore. And so, you really had to pay attention. But anyway, those simplified situations honestly will probably come before municipalities, but it might be at the same time. So the biggest announcement, honestly, is going to be a regulatory one. Some city or state or federal government is going to announce that Tesla's cars, or potentially some other company's cars, have been granted the right to drive themselves. Before this, the full self-driving features are going to get better, but it's going to be incrementally and not a quantum leap. Tesla will have to demonstrate their cars are probably 5 to 10 times safer than human driving before regulatory approval will be there. Now, this data is already coming in. There's a huge lead in terms of accidents per million miles for Teslas with even autopilot versus a normal human driver. So that data is coming in, but they're going to have to prove this is the case in like all situations before level 4 autonomy will be granted, which basically means hands-off driving. It's going to drive itself completely and you don't have to pay any attention. Of course, when this happens, this is going to be absolutely huge news. It's going to dominate the news cycles in that arena for a period of time. So again, it's going to be regulatory, not technological, that's going to create that news cycle. That's going to be the big thing. Now, it'll be based on technology, but that regulatory approval will kind of be like the proof is in the pudding, right? Somebody is saying this is good enough. So if one company, Tesla, is way, way ahead of the others at this point, there's going to be a massive run on that company's vehicles. People are going to want this really badly if it's officially working and been granted the approval of the state. It's, of course, going to cause a huge run on the stock of the company. So people are going to start to see the future of what's going to happen, and they're going to go, holy crap, this is going to be a big deal. So since I have some investment in Tesla, it's a small one, but geez, the bigger it grows, the happier I'll be. Also, there's going to be kind of a domino effect. As soon as one municipality says, or, government or highway system or whatever says that this is allowed, then more and more and more will come in. So that first one is going to be the real ticket to making it happen. But once the first one happens, I predict the other ones are going to kind of domino their way out. Also, as this happens, there's going to be kind of a rollout phase. There's going to be like a 2 to 3 year window where other car companies can attempt to create technology to catch up with Tesla, or they're going to fall really, really far behind. I would not put industrial espionage out of the question at all, because some governments and certainly many corporations are very much into industrial espionage. I would certainly not put this past a lot of companies and governments to try to catch up in a less than honest manner in order not to have one company completely monopolize this. So let's look at 5 years past the first full self-driving regulatory approval. So just to put a number on it, let's say that happens in 2023, right? So 5 years later, 2028. If somebody else matches Tesla's technology within the first 2 or so years, the full self-driving technology, there's going to be really stiff competition between those companies. You can think about like Apple and Samsung in the smartphone, space, right? That there's really, really stiff competition between them. But Tesla could kind of sideline this or derail this by licensing their hardware and their software very rapidly to get ahead of this potentiality. I kind of predict Tesla's going to do this because it's part of their mission is to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. So if they say, if you have a battery electric vehicle car, we'll give you this technology, we'll license you this technology, they're actually doing something, right? They can't really get ahead of this themselves. They can't produce the numbers of millions of cars that rapidly. It's going to take them time to ramp up. So there's a reason for them to go ahead and license this. Plus the fact it's just literally printing money, right? This stuff is a few $100s of hardware and a no-cost software, essentially, right? Once they've got it done, they can just roll it out and roll it out. And then, of course, they get data back, and so they keep increasing their lead. So if that's the case, then very rapidly, millions of cars are going to become autonomously capable. And Tesla's just going to be printing money from the licensing and hardware fees. So good on them, right? They'll be the winners of that one for sure. I predict that many people are going to stop driving themselves. They're just going to let the AI do it. Especially for things like work commutes and kind of boring things, maybe even going to the grocery store and stuff. They're just going to be like, man, this is the same drive every single day. Let the AI deal with it, and I can do something else, right? I can watch YouTube videos, or I can get some work done, or whatever. So they're going to have more work and entertainment time. And many people have pointed out the fact that the infotainment aspect of Tesla and potentially other cars is going to become a huge factor because people are going to use that, and they're going to spend money on that in the car once they don't have to spend that time concentrating on the road. Also, some people are going to start buying Teslas as an investment because robo-taxis will allow them to make a lot of money, right? So if you're not using your car, it just goes out and it earns you money while you're not using it. That's great. Also, semi-trucks are going to be converting to becoming autonomously driven. Humans will still be in the truck as monitors due to regulatory concerns, but basically the trucks are going to drive themselves, especially for the long-haul highway routes. Trucks are going to become much more efficient also. Rather than only being able to be used like 8 to 10 hours a day, they're going to approach 24 hours a day of utilization, subject of course to regulatory approval. but basically what they could do is they could even swap out the monitors in the car. The truck drivers could just, they could switch out, and the truck keeps on driving after it charges up for a half hour or something. I also predict in 5 years that the number of new driver's licenses being issued is going to start going down as kids just don't care about learning to drive anymore. Think about large cities already. In New York, there's a very large percentage of the New Yorkers that don't get driver's licenses because it's just not necessary for a quality life there. So that's going to start to roll out to the nation and the world, etc. In fact, the number of new cars sold is going to start to level off, and it's actually going to start to decline in 5 years. I'm thinking like right around the peak in 5 years, and it's going to start rolling down. This is really big, but I'm going to hold off talking about this till we get to our 10-year predictions. Also, I think in 5 years, there's going to be a kind of Luddite pushback where people will claim that human drivers are better or more nuanced or something. It's going to be the same thing as CDs versus LP records, or film versus digital photography, etc., right? There's going to be this kind of, it's going to be a hipster thing, right? To be a driver, to drive yourself. It'll start to push that direction. Insurance companies will start to reward those who don't drive themselves. In fact, I predict Tesla's insurance will become a huge wing of their business because of two reasons. Number one, they're likely to make you get their insurance if you want to use their cars as a robo-taxi. And so many people will want to do that, and thus they will be forced to buy Tesla insurance in order to do that. And number two, governments will start to hold auto companies rather than the drivers liable for what happens with their cars. Since humans are no longer driving them, it becomes the responsibility of the AI manufacturer if there's an accident. Speaking of, let's talk about accidents. There will be accidents. There have to be accidents. Nothing is 100% safe, right? There also will be fatalities. There likely will only be a very few, but it will be like an airline crash, right? If an airplane crashes, you find out all about it in the news. If a car crashes and kills people, it makes zero news, right? So it'll be huge news. We've already seen this plenty of times with Tesla's autopilot crashes. It makes really big national news. So it will make big news every time there's some sort of accident, and people will question whether this is the best idea or not, even though thousands of people will be being killed by human drivers in the same amount of time. So this is going to cause some pushback, and there's going to be millions or more of insurance settlements being paid out. Suing big companies is a gold mine, at least in the United States. And so, if there is, God forbid, a fatality with a Tesla, good gracious, they're going to sue the heck out of them, right? And they'll probably settle out of court for a whole bunch of money. Thus, it's going to be in Tesla's very much best interest to encourage its owners to insure through them. And so they're going to make their rates really good to try to get as many people as possible insuring themselves through Tesla. If there is a bad enough accident or a bad enough series of accidents takes place, things could actually roll back some. There could be some regulatory retrenchment. But in any case, let's go ahead and take a look at what's going to happen in 10 years, according to my crystal ball. In 10 years post full self-driving regulatory approval, so again, if that happened in 2023, we'd now be looking at 2033. Most people with any money are not going to be driving themselves anymore, right? They're going to have purchased a new car with full self-driving. They're going to let that deal with it. They're going to utilize that time for something else, whether it's entertainment or work. They're going to be using that. It's going to become much more like a commuter train where people are able to get work done or listen to music or take a nap or whatever, rather than having to deal with the stress and, aggravation of driving. Insurance for human drivers is going to start to skyrocket, right? As insurance companies see that there are way fewer fatalities and accidents with full self-driving, the cost of insuring yourself, if you want to drive yourself, is going to go way the heck up. So that's going to drive a lot of people out of the market of being able to even drive themselves if they wanted to. I also predict that there's going to become special tracks or areas that will be set aside as kind of parks for human drivers to have fun. Right? So it's going to be sort of like a horse farm today. You ride a horse today as a pastime, not as a work thing. So eventually, driving a car or driving a gas-powered car, an ICE car, will become a kind of a fun thing to do on the weekends, not something you have to do to get to work or to go to the grocery store anymore. Car sales are going to go way down by 10 years from now with so we're going to hit that and we're going to go, whoo, it's going to start really dropping. With inexpensive and readily available robo-taxis, people simply aren't going to want the hassle and the expense of owning a car and the aggravation of owning a car anymore. At least not more than one. Even in the United States, like oftentimes families own 3 or 4 cars. And that's a huge expense with the insurance and the upkeep and, paying off the cars, et cetera, et cetera. It's a lot of money. So if they could reduce it down to even one, that's a big advantage, and eventually none. This will, of course, have a massive impact on the automotive industry and even manufacturing as a whole, right? What's basically since the early 20th century been a growing pie of people purchasing cars is going to start shrinking. And, ICE cars in particular and cars that can't drive themselves are going to become niche players. And this is only 10 years from now, right? We've had this pie that's been growing and it's going to go, and it's going to start really contracting in just 10 years. And that's just going to cause massive repercussions throughout the manufacturing world. Many car companies are going to be out of business by now. Startups might have taken their place. You don't know. I mean, it's going to be a kind of a Wild West thing for right now. You've got 150 Chinese EV startups right now. So it's quite possible that one or more of those companies will have replaced Ford or GM or BMW by that point as the big boy player, along with Tesla. Some auto companies may well have merged in order to try to stave off bankruptcy. There's also the very distasteful possibility that governments, for kind of prestige or for lobbying purposes, may bail out some of these auto companies. That's just a huge waste of taxpayer money, keeping a dinosaur, on life support. But I wouldn't put it past them, right? Governments have done stupid things like that before. But that is a possibility. But without that intervention, many, many of these large automakers are going to be bankrupt and or have gone out of business completely and or merged and or become subsidiaries of some other company or something like that. There's going to be a really big changeover in the nature of the automotive industry as a whole. Many, many fewer people are going to get driver's licenses by now. It's just not going to be a necessity. And, going towards the future, if the only reason you need a driver's license is for perhaps the odd trip to grandma's house or to drive around in a park area, a lot of people just won't see the value in that. There will also be a new form of wealth being created at this point. Some people are going to amass huge fleets of robotic cars, or some corporations that already exist, and they're going to make money off of these things consistently or constantly, basically. They're going to be utilizing these things at a very large percentage of the autos of the day, right? They'll be using it for 70 or 80% of the day instead of like 5%, which we normally use our cars. And so they'll just be making money off of these guys. I've seen some research that says you can make things like 80% profit margins on the cars if you do that, as opposed to like 20 or 25% maximum if you sell the car. So there's going to be a really, really big push for people to, conglomerate auto fleets. And, who knows? It might be, Bob's robo-taxi service, right? And so you got your app like Uber and you click the button and it's there and it takes you to work and, or it's even scheduled. It just knows when you get off work and it's just waiting for you out front. So while most people get rid of their cars, these people are going to become like landlords. The people who own these cars are going to be renting them out. The people who rent them really have nothing to show for it in the end, right? They've just gotten a ride. And so some people are going to get richer and the regular masses are not going to get richer. And that's an unfortunate reality. But honestly, I think given the level of expense of cars, if you think about how much a car costs you every single year, I think a lot of people are going to be okay with that trade-off. They'll just be like, you know what, this is fine. A lot of people are totally fine with renting houses as opposed to buying them. Tesla itself as a company might decide to hold on to many of their cars to become robo-taxis because they can make even more money this way. But at the same time, they might get hit by antitrust litigation. So, I would certainly say in 10 years, they'll still be selling cars to the consumer. I don't know, though. They may very well be reserving a chunk of it, like a third or something of their cars for themselves. Semi-trucks will certainly be driving long-haul routes on their own in 10 years. There's not going to be any drivers needed anymore. Sadly, this is going to hurt a lot of people who depend on driving for their livelihood. There's a very large percentage of the working population, at least in the United States, and I think in other countries as well, that depends on driving as their means of livelihood. So that's going to cause a big change, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with that group of people. On the good end of things, however, traffic congestion is going to be improving along with air quality because cars are going to start to travel cooperatively to get to their destinations for the efficiency of everyone rather than competitively like we humans like to do. We're always like, me first, right? So cars are going to become more cooperative, but also we're going to have battery electric vehicles. We're going to have greener energy sources. So carbon emissions are going to go down. There also won't be as many cars, so we won't produce as much carbon creating the cars. So all of that is to the good. Parking lots, interestingly enough, are going to start to shrink because if people just get a car that drops them off and then they get another car that picks them up when they go to the grocery store, why do you need 500 parking spots? You can just have a couple for the old people, right? And everybody else just zips in and out and they just have kind of like a turnaround that you get off at. Also, as I said before, car usage is going to go way up percentage-wise. Rather than like the 5% per day, they'll probably be running at 70 or 80%, minus the time they have to be charging, and I guess maintenance every once in a while. The world is going to start to become a greener, more pleasant place for sure. That's assuming we haven't screwed things up so badly with all of our, global warming stuff that it's not past the point of no return. So what are you going to do with all that time you used to spend getting upset with other drivers on the road? You better start thinking about that and planning for it right now. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, definitely make sure you like and subscribe. And definitely also check out the other video for the 500 subscriber giveaway if it's before the 10th of October. And also, please make sure you ask me questions in the comments or at my email address, which is DrKnowItAllKnows@gmail.com. Till next time, bye-bye.